Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Welcome back to the Agents of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Francisco Gonzalez. I got a great guest here today, Riley Kaminer. Riley is basically a tech writer, research, content strategist, also the founder of a firm called ClearCritical. And Riley, before I get back to introducing you, let me just also remind our audience, if this is your first time tuning in here to the Agents of Innovation podcast, you may be listening on, say, Spotify or Apple or one of the many audio platforms where you get your podcasts. If you also want to watch this, we're on YouTube. You can watch this as well and get the full video and see Riley in action coming to us from Madrid, Spain. Also, as you may know, I'm also the founder of Fearless Journeys, a company that really helps people build an entrepreneurial mindset through a lot of different ways, including some live coaching sessions. We've had book clubs and things like that. We also do a lot of great group trips. Who knows, maybe there'll be a future trip to Spain. If so, we'll have to connect with Riley there. But we do connect with a lot of innovators across the world through a lot of these amazing group trips to really help inspire you to learn directly from great entrepreneurs and innovators, such as many of the ones that we've had on this podcast. So please visit fearlessjourneys.org if you'd like to connect with us and join some of the greater activities we have. So you can listen to great innovators like Riley today, or you can also go a step further and connect with them directly in person. So now back to my great guest here, Riley Kaminer, who I happened to get a great chance to see about 6 weeks ago or so, and then again 2 weeks later when I was in Madrid, Spain. Obviously, I was there to walk the Camino. That was not from Madrid, but took the train up to León and walked the Camino for 14 days. But saw Riley on both ends of that trip, so that was great. But I first connected with Riley in Miami, here in South Florida, and because one of the many hats he wears is as a tech writer, and he writes for Refresh Florida, and he had actually covered at least one of the events we did for the Economic Club of Miami when he was down here physically present in Miami more often. But Riley is in Madrid. So Riley, we've got a lot to talk about with you. But first, I just want to welcome you officially to the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Thanks, Francisco. Pleasure being here.
Well, Riley, I knew you mostly grew up in New York. You were technically born in St. Petersburg, Florida, right? But grew up in New York. Tell us a little bit about the early life of Riley Kaminer, and maybe some of those early educational opportunities as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, growing up in the suburbs of New York is really a gift that keeps on giving in many ways. I think it really sets you up with an international mindset, much like growing up in a place like Miami would or South Florida would. And so, kind of growing up, I always had this idea that I wanted to travel and go abroad. And I was lucky enough to do so a few times growing up, kind of the two main ones being I did a summer program in high school in Paris. I think it was after my sophomore year. And then after my junior year, I did one in Barcelona. And that was just such an inspirational moment for me, and just opening up the world and meeting people from different places. And I really felt like I was in my element in that international environment. And so, yeah, I would say growing up, it really always wanting to explore, being very curious, always wanting to learn about new cultures. That set me up for the life that I have now and kind of the path that I've gone down.
Yeah. So, Riley, you're a writer. You also have, as I mentioned, a firm called ClearCritical. Have I said it right? Yeah, ClearCritical.
Exactly.
And so I know you help develop content strategies and writing and even ghostwriting for other people. And that's as a kind of type of job, I guess, you can do well from abroad as well. I want to get, or from really anywhere, right? But tell me a little bit post New York. I mean, I think I agree with you, by the way. I grew up in South Florida, right? Born in Miami, grew up in the Fort Lauderdale area. I guess I just took for granted, and maybe you did too, I don't know, growing up in New York, that, in a place like Miami, even Fort Lauderdale, in a place like New York, you could pretty much potentially meet anyone in the world from anywhere in the world on any given day. And I just kind of took that for granted. You hear a lot of different languages, right? In school, you hear like lots of
Mhm.
different languages of the kids, lots of different religious backgrounds, things like that. And so I don't know. I guess like probably in a lot of other areas of even of the United States, where we're a very diverse country, even a lot of areas like say maybe Nebraska or something, right? Not to pick on Nebraska, but I picked on Kansas in a previous conversation with somebody, but just kind of throw the middle of the country out there. Maybe not quite as diverse, right? So I think maybe that potentially makes us open to more people just naturally than typically. But you also took some steps outside of New York City that maybe opened yourself up. You mentioned those opportunities going to Paris in high school and things like that. But tell us a little bit more about what you did post high school.
Yeah, it's a funny moment when you're when you're 16, 17, 18, and trying to figure out what to do next. And so for me, when I was looking at different colleges, I knew I wanted to go somewhere very different and geographically far. I just felt the need to see something else. And so I applied basically half to universities in California and half abroad. Almost all in the UK and or all of them in the UK except for one, which was in Paris, the American University of Paris. So yeah, it was just something that I was pretty clear on early on that I just wanted to see something different. And looking back, it's actually really funny. I wonder if this resonates with some of your audience. It's like when I was that age, I didn't really even see it as such a big deal to go to the UK, and partly because it's like, well, it's a six flight east, and if I were to go to California, it's a 6 hour flight west. Whatever, what's the difference? I think that's really what I was thinking at the time, and I would later learn that the cultural aspect was very different, and there were some hiccups along the way, especially at first, just getting used to like living in a new country and new people and international environment. But yeah, I mean, I think it really shaped who I am. And I think growing up in those environments is just a huge advantage that maybe people, I guess, don't realize at the time, at least.
Yeah, and I guess coming from New York, whether you go to California or England, they speak English a little bit differently, right? So you went to your first stop was where?
University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and it was
Oh,
cool because I went
well,
to
they
like
speak a
a
whole nother level of English there, right?
oh, it's
Whatever you.
another level for sure. I mean, I went to like a small private school in New York, and then Edinburgh is a huge public university. And so, to some extent, you're a number, which is good and bad. It was good in the sense that I felt like I had total freedom. You're very responsible for your own stuff. No one's going to tell you to go to class, no one's going to tell you to hand in your stuff on time. You really just have to do it on your own. And that was a super important moment for me, I think, that realization. Even, I remember one really funny moment in my second year. Because in my first year, I was in a house, like a housing area with, they call it catered accommodation. So basically, you get a cafeteria and whatever. But in the second year, I was in my own apartment with some friends. And there I remember the first night being like, wow, I have to feed myself now. Something so basic. It's like if I don't go to the store, buy food, cook it, and eat it, then I'm just gonna die of starvation. You know what I mean? And just like little things like that I think are really, I don't know, they really help you grow as a person, and you can learn a lot from that. So yeah, as I was in Edinburgh. As part of that, I ended up going to Spain for a year. It's kind of going abroad from abroad, which kind of made me fall in love with everything that is Spain. And then I ended up
Where
staying in the UK. Oh, sorry,
where were you in Spain when you went
in
abroad?
Madrid.
In Madrid.
And again, that was an interesting moment because Edinburgh, a big public university. This one I went to in Spain was very small, Catholic. So the religious element was quite strong there, which is interesting because I'd say in the Western context we really try to avoid that. I mean, especially in the university context, we don't want to ruffle any feathers, but everyone it's like, no, this is Catholic. This and even within Catholic, it's a Jesuit university, so they're like, or Jesuit. I mean, it's like very, very into that kind of mentality. Everyone who goes to that university, even like me, just studying there abroad for a year, you have to take a class about it's called like Christianity and social ethics taught by a priest. I mean, it's really, and then also it was a small private school, so I mean, they're on top of you like white on rice. Everyone knows everyone, what's going on. So that was an interesting experience because it was almost like going back to school a little bit, and also comparing myself to my peers. I mean, all the kids from abroad, whether it's the US or the UK, or even further afield in many cases, we were so independent. I think a lot of the Spanish kids were really, I mean, living at home, relying on their kind of family structure and stuff. That was a really interesting counter to what I was experiencing in Edinburgh at the time.
Yeah, and I imagine in probably both places, having friends back in the U.S. going to U.S. colleges and universities, whether it's places like state schools like Florida State University or even private schools, right? Maybe Ivy League schools, like whatever. I mean, I don't know, culturally or even just discipline wise or like self sufficient wise. I don't know. I mean, did you see some? Could you tell some differences, even curriculum, education? I mean, could you tell some differences with your experience in Edinburgh, which is, by the way, a university that's been around for a very long time, versus like very traditional university? Like I'm sure it was like really beautiful architecture and everything, versus like say an American university where kids are going to college football games on the weekends and doing all sorts of other stuff.
Well, I'll get to the curriculum bit in a second, but the cultural element that I'll start with is I went back home. I was 21, so it must have been, I guess, my third year for Christmas and New Year's. And my parents at that point were moving from New York to South Florida, so they were selling the house that I grew up in. And I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. Let me host a nice party with all my friends for New Year's. And in the context of Edinburgh, where you can drink alcohol starting at age 18, alcohol wasn't like that big of a thing. It didn't have this idea in people's mind that's like, oh my God, I have to, drink as much as possible, as quickly as possible all the time. It was just like, oh, have a little bit of wine and we'll have some fun, and whatever. So I had that mentality going in to this New Year's Eve party at my parents' house. And let's just say it was a bit of a messy situation. My parents thought it was extremely amusing because I had the best of intentions, and it just got out of control. So that was one interesting moment. I did have the frat house experience, but it was actually in my parents' house by accident at one point. No, but on the curriculum side of things, it was quite different. I mean, England and Scotland are slightly different. Scotland is very similar to the US system, where you pick a few different courses in your first and second years, and then you kind of do your major in the last couple of years only. In England, actually, it's kind of crazy. You just start with what you're studying, and you study that all 4 years, which I think is a bit of a shame because a little bit of the exploration is nice. And that's one thing I think U.S. universities in particular do well. But Scotland was kind of like the best of both worlds. And then I think just the independence of it was really different for me. I think you probably get that at some American universities. If you think of maybe UF, or if you think of like Michigan, there are probably a lot of places like that that are quite big. But even compared with where a lot of my friends went, I mean, they kind of handhold you a lot more in the U.S. context versus what I was accustomed to in the U.K.
So yeah, so you were in the UK, but you first started in Scotland and at Edinburgh, and then you went to Cambridge. Was that a graduate degree?
Yeah, exactly. I did a master's at Cambridge, and that was a totally different environment. Totally, totally different. I
By the
mean,
way, what were you studying at each of these schools?
in Edinburgh, I did a dual degree in business and Spanish. And so I was always interested in kind of the literature element, the cultural element with the Spanish, and it's just kind of a passion of mine. And then I really just always have enjoyed business, being in business, studying businesses, writing about businesses. It's kind of like um, the way that society runs. It's almost like I've always seen it almost like a sociological perspective, and that's why I love your work and the work that I do for people like Refresh Miami, because I can look really deep into like what makes these businesses tick, what is the mindset of the entrepreneur, that sort of thing. And then in Cambridge, I actually focused on something slightly more specific, which was Latin American studies, which is in the politics school. But I chose that program in particular because it was politics, but there was an element of cultural studies with it. So I did a lot of what I ended up writing about actually at Cambridge was about filmmaking and political filmmaking in the 1970s in Latin America, because there are a lot of interesting things
Mm.
that were happening around there. So that was, I guess, a slight step away from the pure business side of things, but it was a really interesting moment to think about societal movements and yeah, and the media and kind of how that all comes together.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Well, I know I think you would. maybe classify yourself primarily as a writer, but they say I've had other writers on this podcast over the years, and some of them, like for example, I'm thinking of my friend Josh Simmons, who goes by JB Simmons in his writing as a novelist, but he actually spent years as a lawyer. Like he went to law school, he worked for a boutique law firm, and one of the reasons he went to law school to begin with is he had I don't know if it was a high school teacher or a college teacher, I forget, that told him, if you want to be a writer, you need to go out in the world and get experience about things. One way to do that would be to go. I think he studied maybe history and then went into law school. I'm trying to remember his undergrad degree, but I've heard this multiple times now, right? You got to go out in the world and get experience that you can then write about, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, whatever. You seem to have done that. So post getting your master's degree at Cambridge, and the master's degree was specifically in what?
Latin American studies, but
Latin
politics.
American
I usually say
studies, and
politics
then
because it's easier.
yeah, so interesting. So you had this business degree, Latin American studies. You're talking about film in Latin America, all these sorts of things. What did you do when you left Cambridge? What was your first steps into your career?
I actually stayed in the UK for a year after that, and I worked at a film distributor that is actually a really interesting organization for your audience who's interested in more like political kind of documentaries. It's called Journeyman Pictures. It was a great place to land because it brought together my love of kind of like the culture and the documentary and the journalism side of things, which I've always done in my life in various ways, and then also the business side of things because ultimately it's a distributor that has to make money in order to then get more films and do more impact, right? And so I was there for a year. Also, what was a really interesting part of that is the founder of that. It's a small company, maybe 25 employees or something. The founder is really a journalist turned entrepreneur, and I think he mixes both of those things really well. And so that was a really great landing pad for me to say, hey, you can actually have quite an interesting career building a nice business, having an impact, but also doing quite interesting work. That was kind of my first place. And then right after that, I had a professor from Cambridge who was in the kind of political space, a political consultant essentially, but focused on technology. And she needed some help. I loved what she was doing. I still love what she's doing. And so I started working for her. So that was great because then COVID happened. So I was working remotely. We were doing some interesting work around the UK and in different places, and then it all went remote, and that's how I landed back in the US.
Interesting. Now, by the way, I also know you met your now wife. You guys just got married a couple months ago, so congratulations. She's from England, and so you met her. I also somehow you both had an interest in Spain. Did she study abroad in Spain too?
Zero. And funnily enough, most British people go to Spain for vacation, kind of like imagine like New Yorkers going to Florida for spring break, stuff like that. That's kind of what British people do with Spain. And yet she is like the one British person who had not done that. So all the British people I could have, chosen as my partner, she actually hadn't. So she kind of had like a clean slate, so to speak, when it comes to Spain. And I just took her there. We went on vacation at one point, and she loved it. And then the digital nomad visa came out. And so we were just trying to figure out exactly what next steps we wanted to take. And I was like, hey, why don't we try this? This could be fun.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
I was sort
So
of convinced her.
post COVID, you come back to the U.S. and where do you go? You go to Florida. Where'd you go?
Yeah, I mean, I landed in South Florida because that's where my parents had moved. I always liked it, but I never properly lived there. And honestly, my perspective at the time was, I'll stay here for a little bit. It's winter, it's cold up everywhere else. It's nice here. I'll stay here for a few months. Then I'll just go to New York, San Francisco, LA, I don't know, DC somewhere. And as happens with a lot of people in that position, you just kind of end up staying. It's just very nice. And also at that time, I was working remotely, but then equally, I started to get involved with local publications like Refresh Miami. I got some work from other publications like Forbes and The Economist and little things here and there that started to kind of bloom. And so I was able to build a business out of that and stay in South Florida, first in Palm Beach and then in Miami.
Yeah. So by the way, I think to your point, sometimes you go somewhere you think you're just gonna get your feet wet and move on somewhere else, and sometimes you just stay there because you get a job, you make connections, you get friendships, like whatever happens, families there, like for you. But also, do you think, Riley, that it's possible that you were thinking California, maybe Silicon Valley, New York, like where all the traditional like tech hub type things were, like, and yet all of a sudden you're there in Miami during COVID and everyone's coming to Florida, everyone's coming to Miami. I remember, one of the top tech people, I believe, with Founders Fund, tweeted out sometime in late 2020, why don't we all just move to Miami? And the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, responded, how can I help? And then all of a sudden there was this huge wave of people not just coming for a month remote work, but staying for many months and staying. Some are still here, and so some have gone back and gone different places. But Miami seems to have blown up like right before your eyes. Do you think that was also maybe part of why some of these opportunities for you materialized while you were in South Florida?
100% on both a personal and a professional level. I mean, on a personal level, a couple of my friends ended up moving there. Also, just there's a kind of flourishing of cultural stuff, going to the Norton in West Palm Beach, the museum in West Palm Beach, for a talk on NFTs given by like the head of NFTs for Sotheby's, just like really cool stuff happening. It's like, whoa, I'm in the place, I'm in the right place. And then, yeah, on a professional level, sure. I mean, a lot of my business was built because of people, moving to South Florida or wanting to know what's happening in South Florida. And so, yeah, I can attribute a lot of my growth to that of the region as well.
Yeah, so this is where I counter you, right? Like I actually became executive director of the Economic Club of Miami in 2023. It was a club that was founded in 2021 by four board members. But the very first event that I put together for the club involved Antonio Garcia Martinez, the author of Chaos Monkeys, and Michael Eisenberg. And I get an email from you, hey, can I come cover this event for Refresh Miami? I was like, yeah, sure. I was like, I went to the board. I was like, hey, this is great. Look, I got these two speakers. I got press coming. First event. It was good. By the way, Michael Eisenberg, I had found out that he was going to be in Miami. We had never met in person, but I had interviewed him about a year and a half earlier on this podcast, and he had just put out a new book and everything. So it was great, and he's one of the top venture capitalists in Israel, and then he brought in Antonio, who I did not previously know, who ended up being really fantastic, and some of what they said that day made a great impression on me about their sort of perspectives from, say, Israel and Silicon Valley of what Miami can and should be. And then you covered it so well in that article that I actually was able to go back to the article because, when you're running an event, you're like running around and you're trying to figure it out. And I watched the video later to catch things, but your article really put it together very well. And anyway, so this put you on my radar as a tech writer for Refresh Miami that's really kind of paying attention to all the happenings going on. So tell me a little bit about your experience, and I know you're still do some writing for Refresh Miami. So maybe a little bit about the publication, how you got involved, and what you're doing there.
Well, it all happened because of a tweet. I mean, I think it was Maria Derchi, the woman who runs Refresh Miami, put out a tweet around that same time of those tweets you were talking about. Maybe, yeah, around that same time, I suppose. And yeah, it was just like, oh, looking for people to help out, who's interested. And I jumped on it and never looked back. It's a great publication. It's actually non-for-profit. They do a bunch of stuff. The main thing that I work on them with, well, the only thing I work on them with which is their main thing is the journalism side. So they write articles about what's going on in South Florida's tech scene. I've written almost 1,000 articles. I'm getting very close to 1,000 articles. We have to celebrate when that happens.
With Refresh or in general?
I mean,
Wow,
well
that's
over 1,000.
incredible. Since
Yeah,
2021 or 2020?
yeah, 2021, very early
Wow.
2021. So it's been quite a ride. And yeah, I need to do more finger stretches. Lots of typing. No, but it never gets old, never ever ever. And a lot of it's very similar. A company's just moved, a company's fundraising, whatever. But each individual story is its own thing. And seeing companies grow. I mean, I just talked with one company yesterday, EduCup, which is an ed tech company in South Florida, And the guy told me, "Oh, we have 2.5 million users." And I'm thinking to myself, I talked to you guys 3 years ago, and I mean, they maybe didn't have zero users, but 10,000, 12. I mean, it was a very early stages, and now you've seen this company flourish. That's just so nice to see. And my work, particularly with Refresh, lets me do that. And then I still write for a series of other publications, some national, but always about international or kind of business at some scale. And a lot of focus on tech.
Yeah, I mean, you write for Forbes, right?
I don't do that much for Forbes anymore. I still do work with Entrepreneur Magazine, but and tons of local publications in South Florida. Um, so it's been a really great ride. And going back to my childhood, I mean, my first job was in journalism. I remember so specifically, I was 14 because my birthday's on June 21st, and I was doing the summer internship, and I had to wait until my 14th birthday because in New York State you're not allowed to work till you're 14, or I guess W-2 or whatever it was. So I had to like go on my birthday to apply for this work permit, and then I worked for a local news station in New York where I grew up, and just have always been doing journalism since.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say a couple things here. This story that you just said is very. I hear this from a lot of very successful entrepreneurs. I had to wait till I was 14 or 16, whatever the law in their state was, to work. They're like ready to work. I can think of a guy here in Delray Beach. He started a 2-ton marketing firm, Ryan Boylston. Ryan Boylston here in Delray Beach, and I've had him on the podcast here. He's in my second book here that I've written about. But Ryan said the same thing. He went to Walmart and went there before. I forget what age it was. If it was 15, 14, I can't remember. But he went there like a couple weeks before he turned that age, just so he could get ready to put the application in for the day he turned, 15 or 16, whatever it was that the law allows you to work. So anyway, I just think it's interesting because I think it demonstrates, like Riley, you're an example of this, of like the very early work ethic that it takes to build experience and skills. And like, that job that, people get at 14, 15, 16, it's, it's not some like big, huge job. It might be, stuffing tacos at Taco Bell. It might be doing whatever. But at least like you're starting to get the flow of like, what does it mean to like get a paycheck, to pay taxes, to like, that $15 an hour I might make is actually, I'm not getting the whole thing, right? Like somebody's taking a cut of that. And also like what that means for like how it helps you build, wealth, but have money to be able to afford things you want. But maybe more than anything, like just building the skills, the experiences, the relationships, that work ethic, that grind that's kind of built into you. But the other thing I want to ask you is, so your first job was actually in journalism, which is pretty amazing. What like was your interest prior to turning 14 that made you be interested in that field?
Well, it's funny. So I actually, with a friend, started a newspaper in my local community. And I remember creating a GeoCities website. I don't know if any of your audience is old enough to remember. I know you got a lot of young audience to remember GeoCities, but it's basically like the first version of like a WordPress where you can create a website. And I remember it was called Westchester Wanted News, WWN. Uh, and we just printed it on my printer at home and put it in little sheets and distributed it. And then soon after that, I actually created a podcast internally for my school called F12 Help Me, which was like a tech help podcast because no one knew how to use the smart boards and all this new technology that was coming out at the time. So it was always kind of in my veins, and I think basically someone at my school saw the F12 Help Me and saw that I was really keen to do more of the journalism stuff. And so she connected me with an alum from my school who was the COO of this news station and said, "Hey, here's a cool kid if you need him to do something." And you were saying, Francisco, so many of these jobs are, stuff in taco shells, etc. What's funny about that particular job is it actually was extremely material what I was doing. I mean, it's totally crazy to think back to this, and I don't know if I mean I don't know if they would do this anymore, but I was 14 years old, and they had a live TV program. It was like a 30-minute news program, and they have callers. for people call in and like give their opinion on like the local politics. And they had me, the 14-year-old intern, screening the calls to go live on air. And they had some spicy people had some spicy takes, let's just put it that way. It was, I guess it was like the beginnings of Obama, and it was like kind of controversy around that and whatever. And I was fielding those calls, and luckily nothing bad ever happened. But it was like, wow, you're putting the 14-year-old in charge of something that's could like get your TV license revoked. It's a pretty wild looking back on it.
Yeah, and what if something kind of got past you and they went back and like probably the person who like hired you for that would probably be the person in trouble, right? I mean,
And it's just crazy. And I remember I was doing man on the street interviews as well. They would just send me out, and I'd go to like a corner in White Plains, New York, like kind of the main city in Westchester. And just, every time I go past that corner, when I go back to Westchester, I think about this, just like asking people, Michael Jackson died yesterday. What did you think about blah, blah, blah? That's that type of thing. Like, this is totally crazy. But I mean, in all fairness, I did a good job. They knew who I was and what I was doing. And I mean, that experience has served me so well now in my career.
yeah, and also I think when you get those early jobs, like for example, that I feel like it's a whole nother level of like I'm thinking of like cold calling, right? Like I've done telemarketing and stuff, and like, but when you're doing it, it it helps you to experience maybe some of the fears and anxieties that go into maybe like for this in this position, you're man on the street, you're talking publicly to people with a camera. And how old were you?
14.
14 doing that too. Plus you're screening calls. Like you're actually getting the experience of learning how to talk to different kinds of people, do so publicly, kind of just being thrown to the fire. So it's at the beginning it's tough, and nobody has that experience until you get it. That's why it's called experience. And you got to go get it. So it's great. So you have all these things have lined up for you. You're in Miami. You're writing for some publications. At what point do you decide to start what has become your strategy firm, ClearCritical?
Yeah, I mean, the core of what I've always done, I'm still doing, which is telling stories. And I think that's a craft that I will always work on my entire life to some extent or another. And it's one that it's just you never perfect it, right? But in any case, journalism is in a weird place. It has been since I started. I mean, it's almost kind of funny. I actually did work in a very traditional journalistic environment at the start, but then I've always been freelance ever since. And the state of the industry is pretty dire, and which is bad for a lot of reasons, but it's just kind of the reality of it. And there is a plus side to it, which is now there are new outlets. This podcast is a great example, right, of telling stories in a very genuine way. And so basically, what Clear Critical does is tell stories just like they would be for journalism, like a journalism audience or journalism purpose, but directly for the businesses. So like ghostwriting, we work a lot with investors and VCs or family offices, that sort of things, to help them communicate their ideas. And why I love it, I mean, from, on like a spiritual side, let's say, is VCs and startups and entrepreneurs have some of the most interesting perspectives out there. I mean, they're to use the tired phrase, in the trenches, right? I mean, everyone makes everyone jokes about that, but it's true. They're seeing thousands of businesses every year. They're talking with their investors, who are some of the most influential people in the world. And what I saw as a journalist was I was pitching. That's the thing you do as a freelancer. You're everything left, right, and center. And there just weren't enough opportunities for me to tell the stories that I thought should be told. And so basically, what happened was one of the people I wrote a story about was this VC guy. I got along well with him. The story went well. And he's like, hey, can you just write some stuff for my LinkedIn? And at the time, I was doing a lot for Forbes, and it's like, why would I do that? Like, who's this guy? Like, what are you talking about? I'm not like a PR guy. What are you talking about? But he was really convincing, and he does like fintech in Latin America, and so he had some cool ideas about that. I was like, whatever. I'll just throw this guy a bone. We'll see what happens. And he started publishing some of this stuff, and it was just going all over the place. I mean, it was just doing so well in terms of impressions, and people were really commenting on it, and his businesses and his portfolio were really learning from it. And I was like, wow, the impact of just writing some random LinkedIn post, which is what I felt like it was, compared to like being published in a newspaper. Oh my God. It seems like so lame or kind of whatever, but actually the impact was greater. And so then I thought to myself, well, why don't I do this more? So then I kind of reached out to just some of the people I'd interviewed that I thought had interesting ideas. I mean, it was not like a business sales strategy that was thought out at all. It's just like, hey, Francisco, you're cool. You got cool stuff. I did this thing for you. Do you want me to do more for you? A few of them said yes. That was kind of the sales strategy, and it worked. And so now we've grown, and I have people helping me and co-writers. I've written a book, written a book for a client. So I've done all sorts of stuff since then. But the core is the same, the storytelling, and that's what I love doing.
Well, I think what's interesting for anybody listening is we're in a world right now that the economy is rapidly changing, rapidly evolving, I mean, faster than it ever has. Right? You just mentioned journalism as an example of, I mean, in my lifetime, your lifetime, we've gone from, I mean, you literally were starting a print, doing print newspaper as well, and writing for digital publications, but everything has gone mostly online. It's very rare to actually see a physical newspaper these days. They are there, right? People do get them delivered still and everything, but that, I think, as you go to the younger audiences, they barely have ever seen an actual physical newspaper. And anyway, but I think for anybody listening, like, think about how like Riley was able to like translate his skills in different ways. But like he said, it's still for him doing the same type of thing, using the same skills, just moving them to where there's market opportunity, and still enjoying the job because you're doing the same thing. You're like one element of what you do for Refresh Miami. You still cover stories with a byline that gets printed. You've had almost 1,000 stories now in under your name in this one publication over the last less than 4 years. But then on the other end, you have this whole firm where you mostly, correct me if I'm wrong, sounds like you mostly ghostwrite for other people. You develop content for them, for their businesses, but you're covering the same types of people. You're covering VCs and people in tech, and you're able to do it. So I think it's like a really interesting how you can shift your skill sets, because we're also in a world now, like, there's all these fears of AI taking over and all these things. And I think even writers, I mean, I'm using AI more. I'm still producing my own voice, my own content when I'm doing things. But if AI can help me speed it up a little bit and produce more, sure, why not, right? Gosh, even on this podcast, the platform I'm using today isn't the platform I used when I started this 10 years ago. This is Riverside. And even Riverside, in the last 2 years since I've used it, I don't know, it was a year or so ago that they started creating these little magic clips. So if you go to, our podcast Instagram account and everything, you can see these 30 to 60-second clips that are mostly auto-generated. I mean, I make the final decision if I like it and all that stuff, but it's quick. I don't have to spend, a half hour, an hour, like producing a little 30, 60 set, finding the clip and everything. It finds it for me. So we'll be able to produce a lot more content and have more people find it. So I think as we're moving into this world, I think you're a great example of somebody who has been able to repurpose your skills in different ways. And now you have this whole firm. And by the way, I don't think you're the only one that works there, right? You have some other people that work with you.
Yeah, there's like a core team of five, and then lots of freelancers around it. Um, but to your point, now I think the tools, yes, there are challenges with, threats with AI and whatnot, but also the opportunities are vast. I mean, just thinking back to my time in high school, because also on top of writing, I was doing a lot of photography, and I was like killing myself to get a byline in high school at the local, it's called the Rye Record. It's like, oh my God, this is, I mean, circulation's probably like 3,000, if that, but I was like, oh my God, I have to get in the Rye Record. Like, that's it. That's the place. Now I think, if I had TikTok, for example, I mean, I would be doing all sorts of stuff on there, with video content. I mean, that would have been many orders of magnitude greater than whatever reach I struggled to get, and in those years. And I think, for your listeners, I think they need to understand you can just do things. I mean, you talk to successful people, even a lot of people on your podcast, and some of the stories I've been reading in your book of cold emails, and just the distance you can go with just shooting your shot and just saying, "Hey, if I can be helpful, here's my idea. And yeah, 90% of people won't respond, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you get a few responses, and that's all you need.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Riley, I'm thinking of people who might be listening because I do run the Economic Club of Miami. We may have some people in that audience that are in all sorts of businesses and others that they may say, "Hey, I like what Riley's doing. I love him to do something, work with me with my business, maybe create some content." How can they best reach you, and what kind of services would you provide?
Yeah, definitely. We can find me on LinkedIn, Riley Kaminer, or RileyKaminer.com, clearcritical.com. I'm all over the place. But in terms of what we provide, I mean, it's basically the journalism for businesses. So thinking about their LinkedIn presence, thinking about newsletters, communications, speech writing, whether it's for public consumption, like on social media, or private consumption, like to your investors, and everything in between. And so that's been really helpful, and just you know we're PR adjacent. PR is much more about catering to legacy media, and I think broadly that's a waste of time, having been on the inside, and you just don't need to. So this is kind of a slightly different approach, but yeah, if you're looking to broaden your appeal and let people know what you're doing, I'd love to help out.
Yeah, that's great. And by the way, I'll provide those in the show notes as well, those links so people can easily find you. Also, just kind of to take off on a little bit of what you said right there. Um, First of all, I think, and you mentioned this a little earlier in the episode here, but you're really a storyteller at heart, and so that's what journalists oftentimes do. Good journalists, right? They tell stories. Maybe good authors tell stories, right? Whether it's even nonfiction, fiction. But I also see a lot of the tweets where you try to educate people on tell your story more often. What can you tell us all, whether other content creators or people who are who have businesses, because we're all at the end of the day we're all selling something, right? But the best way to sell might be through stories. Tell us a little bit about the importance of storytelling.
Yeah, I think it's important on a few levels. On one level, and especially for like the tech investor slash entrepreneur people that I work with, writing really helps you clarify your thoughts. And so sitting down and thinking, okay, what do I really think about that? What do I really think about the future of fintech in Latin America? What about the payment rails? What about this, that, and the other? It helps to just kind of write it down and think about it just on a purely kind of personal level, I would say. The other thing, like the biggest tip that I would have for people is, the concern a lot of people have is that, oh, people are going to find me annoying if I'm constantly posting stuff. Well, the good news, bad news about that is the algorithm doesn't show your stuff to everyone all the time. I wish it did, trust me. But, if you have, to use round numbers, like 3,000 followers on LinkedIn, if you're lucky for a normal post, 10% of those people are going to see it, if that. So you really have to just show up and be consistent with it. You have to, think about your audience, think about their pain points, think about your knowledge that you can share, and just keep hitting those points. And it might feel a bit weird or a bit repetitive, but trust me, people actually like to hear from you. It's very hard, I would say, to be annoying or to do too much in this space.
What's funny is I've had this podcast now over 10 years, and I feel like at some point I had it when I had it 5 years, and I felt like I was probably over posting about listen to my episode, listen to this, listen to this. And I mean, I would run into people that I knew pretty fairly well, and maybe they hadn't seen me a while, or maybe I never talked about the podcast with them. I don't know. And I would mention in a conversation, like in real life conversation, I would reference my podcast, and they would go, "You have a podcast?" And I was like, "I feel like I've posted 1,000 posts about my podcast. How do you not know?" Like, I feel like I'm annoying, like what you just said. I feel like I'm annoying people, and yet people who know me in real life and see me in real life, like this happened multiple times, by the way, that I was like, how did this person not know I have a podcast?
And there's a really funny corollary to this. There's this quote that is a bit crass, but it's also very true, which is likes ain't cash. And I think it's from Eddie Kwan on Twitter, who's a great content writer. But the idea I think is very true. And like basically I've had experiences where I post a bunch of stuff, maybe I'm not getting that much traction, and then I'll go to an event and someone somewhat influential to me that have crossed paths with or vaguely knows me now follows me will say, "Oh, hey, I loved that tweet about XYZ." And it'll be like a tweet from 6 months ago that I thought was totally relevant. And this person will have been sat there, thought about it, but they never texted me. They never commented. They didn't like, but they saw it and they've been thinking about it. And I see that so much also with my clients, with like a venture fund, for example, that's publishing a story about something they're investing in, and then 6 months later, after they sign a new LP, that LP will said, "You know what really got me? When you wrote that post about that company, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, and then I ultimately invested." That's it's about the quality, not necessarily the quantity, and that gets missed a lot.
Yeah. By the way, I've also had that experience too, right? Where somebody, and this might be even somebody from afar. Maybe I haven't seen them in a while, whatever. Maybe you're right, and they'll say something, and they'll sometimes reference an episode that I had, a year or two ago, right? Or even people are like, they haven't joined Fearless Journeys, right? But they tell me, "Oh, I've been seeing all your stuff. Keep it going," or like, "I want to join. I want to come on that next trip. Tell me." And I'm like, "Really? This person's paying attention?" So I think sometimes you didn't even people you didn't expect, right? Like that tweet somebody told you they remembered a very specific thing you wrote 6 months ago in 140 characters, but it was meaningful to them. It stayed with them. It also associated you with them, with that idea or whatever you were doing. The other thing is I have to say is when you were talking about storytelling and businesses, I think we both share the same passion for that aspect of wanting to tell stories that are not being told, because that's how this podcast started. I was working for a public policy think tank, primarily doing fundraising for them, and I would be one of the head people of the organization going out and meeting with all the different donors, potential donors. I also, that also makes me go to conferences and events and just run into a whole lot of interesting people. And oftentimes I would have lunch or a meeting or with somebody, and they're mostly the kinds of people I would be interacting with are business owners, entrepreneurs. And I would leave a lot of those meetings, and one of the first thoughts in my mind would be, "Man, I wish more people would hear that person's story." You've probably read this in my book, right? Like this is what stimulated me. And I actually said that word, story, that person's story. After probably 20 times saying that to myself, one day in the end of 2014, I was turning on a podcast, which were kind of early in those days. I was an early podcast listener. When I was having that thought about the person I had had dinner with the night before, "Man, I wish somebody would hear that person's story." I'm turning on a podcast as I'm having that thought, and I go, maybe I could do a podcast, tell these people stories, people I already know. And that's what you did with, your coming across all the stories of people you're covering in VC tech, and somebody kind of gives you this idea a little bit, but you blossomed it now into a great business that you have. And Riley, this business that you have in this new world we live in can be done from virtually anywhere for the most part. So last time I saw you, before I saw you in Madrid, I saw you in Miami in 2023. And then all of a sudden, I kind of start seeing on X all these posts from Madrid. Tell me what was the impetus of going to Madrid?
I just like Madrid. I mean, honestly, there's not much more to it. I mean, it's a really nice place to live. Spain in general is really nice. A very high quality of life. And it's actually been more fulfilling than I expected from a work perspective. I mean, kind of one of our main clients has a lot of people here, but I mean, pretty much every one of my clients has come through Madrid at some point. Especially if you're flying from Miami to Europe, it's kind of the first port of call for a lot of people. If you're Latin American, Madrid is like your home in Europe. So I was a little bit worried about that aspect when I was coming here, but it's actually been no problem at all, keeping up with my clients. And the reality is we're all so global now. No one's just static in one place. We all have partners in different places and go to different conferences in different countries, and so it's somewhat irrelevant, I think, now where you are. I still try to go out to San Francisco like at least once a year. Um, my wife's family's out there, so it's a bit, kill two birds with one stone. But it's good to be in the places where it's happening. Going to New York to see my friends. I go to Miami to see my family. I spend a lot of time still in Miami, I mean, months every year in Miami, or South Florida. So yeah, I think it's important to have those touch points. But in general, I think it's such an amazing time. And I know you're a Latin American lover, as I am, and I actually spent a whole year. traveling around Latin America and doing kind of 3 to 4 months in 4 different places. And it was all because I have this flexibility through my business, and it's been hugely beneficial.
Yeah, well, look, I think you're right. I mean, I think the world we live in now, I mean, you could do a lot of your work from everywhere, but I do think it's helpful to be in a place like Madrid, like Miami, maybe a San Francisco, New York, right, where there's a lot of people coming through, like you said. I mean, it's not just any place, right? It's a very and I saw that too. In the couple days I was there, I was able to meet with you, and a couple other people put me in touch with a few other people I was able to meet with in 2 days, and I was like, oh, there's a lot going on here. But I think the connections and the touch points between Miami and Madrid are strong because of what you just said too. The Latin American element in both Miami and Madrid, also the Miami to Madrid connection for Europe. So I think we're going to start seeing, to be honest with you, I'm already hearing more touch points from other people in this Miami Madrid connection. We run the Economic Club Miami, we do a full day conference called the Miami Economic Forum. I actually think our next one in 2026 may have a little Spain connection, just because we're starting to see those business connections really line up. And for a lot of businesses in Madrid, they see Miami as the gateway from Latin America to them, and then the opposite is true too. So anyway, but I do think, yeah, you've been in some really great spots: New York, Miami, Madrid. So you've probably it is important to touch base with people in person from time and to build those relationships in real life, as they say, IRL. But Riley, we will see you hopefully in real life soon enough. Let us know when you're back here in South Florida, and also in the meantime, we'll have to follow you on LinkedIn, on X, and all these sorts of places. But I want to thank you for being on. But I just want to give you any last words of any parting last words you'd like to leave with our audience.
No, thank you for all you're doing. I mean, I think just the through line through all of your work is just showing the importance of entrepreneurship. And I think that really can't be understated. We talk about this a lot from an economic perspective or from a political perspective and its importance. But I think also we can't forget about the personal benefit that you can get from it besides money and whatever. I guess, even if you're not successful, I think you get financially, there's so much you can get from it on a spiritual level, and the personal development you get. It's just kind of like a cheat code to growth in a lot of ways. And so I thank you for what you're doing in kind of promoting that. And just on my end, I'm happy to always mentor people, take on interns, that sort of thing, to kind of help spread this entrepreneurial journey and message as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, by the way, I would definitely confirm what you said. I often said for many years, and would still confirm this. Even if I was the only one listening to my podcast, I get to have it's an entree point to all these interpersonal relationships I get to build with people and have 1 hour conversations with now 159 people. I think we're up to now, Riley. So it's really great, and I think those relationships then have a domino effect, right? So you've seen that in your own work, in the hundreds and hundreds of people you've been able to connect and interact with through the writing of articles, coming to events. I mean, the connections we've made, I think, with each other as well, being able to say, hey, I'm coming to Madrid. Let me stop in and see you, right? Anyway, thank you again, Riley, for being on the Agents of Innovation podcast and for being an agent of innovation yourself. And we will see you soon.
Thank you.